Welcome everybody to the Student Hall of Fame reunion. I'm Charles Overby, and I'm just delighted to stay. It's a real thrill for me for all of you to be here in this building. And I want you to know that the reunion of the Student Hall of Fame that took place 10 years ago was the inspiration for the design of this building, and particularly this auditorium that we're in right now. 10 years ago, we were looking for a place on campus where we could hold a forum like this for between about 100 and 200 people. There were bigger places, Fulton Chapel. There were some smaller places, but there really wasn't a place that could hold between 100 and 200 people. There was one place, a beautiful place, the chapel. And if you were there, how many were there 10 years ago? Oh, really, quite a few. You remember, that's a great place to do it, but that really wasn't what the chapel was designed for. They were nice enough to let us come in. And so when they decided to build this Center for Southern Journalism and Politics, they were nice enough to ask me how I thought it ought to be designed. And remembering that forum 10 years ago, I said, well, first and foremost, it has to have an auditorium that is multimedia capable and can have a place where people can come and discuss important issues in comfort and in style. And so they built that. The only failing was the name they put in front of it. Other than that, it was great. So it's so good to be able to see everybody. We got a chance to visit last night, and now come together to be able to have a conversation. I've entitled this afternoon, Starting Strong, Finishing Strong. And the starting strong, of course, relates to all of you starting out as Hall of Fame members. You know, it's a pretty big deal to be an all-star, but it's an even bigger deal to be in the Hall of Fame. In the major leagues, there are a few people every year that are named to the all-star team, but only a small percentage of those ever make it to Cooperstown. And so you made it to Cooperstown. You made it to the Oxford Ole Miss Hall of Fame. And so it's really great that you'd come and participate in this. And so we're going to have a conversation, not just with our panelists, but with the whole room here. And I hope you'll jump in, and I'll certainly be encouraging to do that. How appropriate it is, since we're talking about starting strong, finishing strong, to have Governor William Winter open up our forum this afternoon. If you've read the papers or watched television at all in the last couple of weeks, you know he just turned 90 years old. He's had so many great birthday celebrations over the last couple of weeks, not because he wanted them, but because so many people wanted to honor him and to be with him. There was one in Natchez. Curtis Wilkie's here somewhere. Curtis is a senior fellow here at the Overby Center. He was down in Natchez. There was a big book festival that honored the governor on his birthday. A week or so ago at the Old Capitol, there was a symposium on the future of Mississippi in the South. Over 300 people were there and had a raucous time there. And so that was a lot of fun. And here we are today, still celebrating his 90th birthday, and his celebrating your achievements as well. Starting strong, finishing strong. The governor started strong. He was in the Hall of Fame here. He had a few interruptions, not the least of which was World War II. Greatest generation. And it was moving to me to stand next to the governor and see him. We were over there in the student union looking at pictures of his classmates in the Hall of Fame. And he pointed to that one and said, he died in action. Pointed to another and said, he died in action. And those of us who had it pretty easy can't even understand what it meant to be part of the greatest generation. So it's wonderful that he could come through all that and do all that he's done. But even coming through World War II, still didn't run. Still had a lot of interruptions. I mean, he ran for governor in 1967 and lost to John Bell Williams. And he ran for governor, in 75, and he lost to Cliff Finney. So he had to run 3 times to win. And I was going back through some old Mississippians that I was editor of, and about 3 months after he had been beaten for governor the first time, he did an interview with one of our reporters, and it was a lead story on page 1. Said, well, I'm not going to give up on the political system just yet. So I stated he didn't give up on it. He's here with us. He's going strong. And Governor, we're glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for starting strong with us here today. We owe Charles so much. We owe him for where we are, and we owe him for adding prestige to this university. Thank you for the contribution. And I inherited this because I'm the oldest person in the world, I think, on the basis of seniority. But I welcome the role, and I want to tell all of you how meaningful it is for me, as it is for all of you, to be able to come back to this campus. And let me just tell you, by way of very brief remarks, what I've been doing today. Charles caught me looking at the Hall of Fame pictures over there a while ago. I was really checking if they still had left my picture on the wall, and I found to my relief that it was still there. But let me tell you about some very random thoughts that I've had as a result of what I've done today. I went from the inn up to Guyton Hall on the other end of the campus. I got somebody to drive me up there. I didn't walk, but I walked back. And that was where Andy Mullins was holding a meeting of his Mississippi Teacher Corps students. That is a remarkable organization. That was organized here a few years ago to take bright young graduates of some of the best, most prestigious universities, including the University of Mississippi in the country. But Harvard, Yale, Michigan, all the big schools, Stanford, are participating in the Teacher Corps, and these bright young people come in, and under a stipend, they are able to teach in schools, some of the have-not schools in the state, and they can teach 1 or 2 years, and when they get through, they can keep on teaching, but they will have a master's degree when they get through. And so many of them are introduced to the teaching profession. But I have personally observed that the schools where they go, these bright young graduates, are enlarged in their ability to teach the kids that otherwise would not be exposed to good teaching. And it raises the standards of the schools. And so they go on from there to do various things. Many of them go into business. Many of them stay in the teaching profession. But it's a great experience for the participants. So I spent an hour just in conversation with this bright group of people, teaching in places that nobody with a Harvard degree or even an Ole Miss degree, bright student, would go. And it's making a difference in our system of education. And then I came on back down and I walked by some of the buildings on this campus. And I was reminded of the leadership that we have had here over the years. And as I walked down Fraternity Row, I saw this magnificent university law center, named appropriately for former Chancellor Robert Cayat. That building, if you haven't seen it, it would be a credit to any university campus in the country. Named for one of the great university leaders in Robert Cayat. And then as I walked a little further, I passed by the Alexander Bondurant building, the old graduate school building, named for that distinguished educator who spent 47 years on the faculty of the University of Mississippi. And then I came along and I got to some of the buildings closer to the Lyceum, the J.D. Williams Building, library. He was the chancellor when I was here. He was here during that very unfortunate time where he really put his own career on the line in attempting to keep the University of Mississippi in good standing with the universities of this country. And then I went on and I saw Bryant Hall, named for Dr. Alton Bryant, one of the great teachers here. And then I saw the Barnard Observatory just across the street, F.A.P. Barnard, the founder of Barnard College, the president of Columbia University for 27 years, the second chancellor of the University of Mississippi. And come on around in this building right here, the Overby Center, adjacent to the Farley Law School, old law school. Bob Farley, one of the great teachers of America. Next door, Lamar, LQC Lamar Hall, the old law school. And then down at the bottom of the hill, the Silver Pond, named for Dr. Jim Silver, one of the great historians who was not treated well here, but who fought through those terrible years and who inspired a lot of us to stay in the battle and fight for a good quality of life for every citizen of this state. And then, of course, we had lunch over the building where the photographs of those of us who are members of the Hall of Fame were, and I went over and just engaged in a little reminiscing and remembering as I looked around those panels of photographs. And I came to the ones that represented my contemporaries at Ole Miss. The president of the student body, Gus Gerard from my hometown of Grenada, who was killed in action in World War II. And his successor, Bill Sam from Vicksburg, killed in World War II. His successor, Herman Baxter, president of the student body, killed in World War II. My successor as editor of the Mississippian, in the same panel with me as a member of the Hall of Fame, Joe Wagner, killed in World War II. And that was the panel Marilyn Howell Bullion is in, first woman president of the student body at Ole Miss. So we have had so many inspiring people associated with this university. And that's the one thing I want to say today. There are people who go around saying, well, I don't owe anything to anybody. I'm a self-made person. I'm where I am because of what I did. There's not a single person in this room, there's not a single person anywhere who can say I am where I am because of what I did. We are who we are because of the inspiration and support, love, assistance of so many people, our parents, our teachers. The teachers here at Ole Miss opened me up to a world that I had not known growing up in the country down in Grenada County. They started me on a career. And whatever success I've had, I have to give full credit to the inspiration that I got here on the campus of the University of Mississippi. All of us are indebted to so many people that we don't even remember all of them. But we are who we are not because of what we did, but because of what so many other people have done for us. And so the only message I would bring this morning is, let us all remember this. You represent a significant cross-section of the leadership of this university when you were students, and since that time, the communities of which you were part. Let us all remember how much we owe to those who have helped us along the way, and how much we ought to be continue to be dedicated to raising the quality of life for all of the people who live in our society. I am so honored to join you here.
I believe we could just say amen and go home now. Before we start with our panel discussion conversation, I'd like to recognize just 2 or 3 people. Everybody here is a superstar and deserves recognition. To my knowledge, there are 3 father-son Hall of Fame members. That is an incredible accomplishment. There is 1 mother-daughter team of the Hall of Fame. That's maybe an even more incredible situation. And there are 2 brothers. So we have one of the father-son teams here today, and it's Brad Dye and Hamp Dye. And so Hamp and Brad, thank you. I notice they're not sitting together, so. And then there's Rose and Lily Flanoral. And
they're not sitting together either.
That's great. Yeah, it's like church. It's like church, isn't it, Rose? And then the brothers are Gene and George Fair. And we're glad they're with us today. George is actually giving an award, and he's running over here as soon as he finishes giving it. But Gene can represent him ably as well. I want to introduce our distinguished panel now, and just to tell you now, I was at the Daytona 500 last weekend. It's the first time I'd ever been. And most of you race car fans, and I'm not a real race car fan, there's a pace car that starts the race. And so this afternoon's conversation, our panelists are the pace car. They're going to start the conversation, and then when the engines really get revved up, we're going to get all of you in on the action. I'll introduce the panelists from the time they left Ole Miss forward. And we have this great diversity this time, really I think more than we did 10 years ago, of people who had been away from the university a long time and people who just barely left it. In fact, the ink on their diploma may not still be dry. Ralph Vance left 45 years ago. Dr. Vance was in the class of 1968, professor emeritus of the Department of Medicine at the Ole Miss Medical School, and the former national president of the American Cancer Society. Melanie Dowell left 33 years ago, class of 1980. She's a senior vice president at Morgan Stanley Smith Barney in Jackson. Claire Dobbs left 15 years ago. She's the assistant minister at Oxford University United Methodist Church here in Oxford. Josh Randall left 3 years ago, class of 2010. He's the National Executive Director of the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, one of the British royal family's principal philanthropic programs here in the United States, Washington, D.C. Cortez Moss just barely left. 1 year ago, class of 2012, he's a teacher of honors English at Greenwood High School with Teach for America, Greenwood, Mississippi. Please welcome all of our panelists. Now, I've been given a lot of advice on how to run this panel. I'm used to getting advice, but as a newspaper editor, I'm also used to ignoring it. So I want to just make sure that we are substantive, but we're not completely boring either. So I'm going to start with Josh. Josh, you represent the British royal family, and that's quite a job for you to have in Washington. And so you've had an opportunity to have some one-on-ones with the British royal family. And I'd like you to tell, just in the privacy of this room here.
And to those watching on television.
Just on the Ole Miss Network. Tell us one stereotype that's either true or not true about the British royal family in general, or specifically about one, Prince Harry or whoever you want to mention?
Well, I'll give you a two-way street on that. One, they're very royal. A lot of people think, they're very used to people, some will bow, some will curtsy, but something that you wouldn't think is that they are very philanthropic. Most of them, that is their full-time job. Prince Philip, who's the Duke of Edinburgh, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, created our organization, the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, back in 1956. And since that time, he's reached over 8 million young people from over 144 countries across the globe. People don't realize that, but the award program is all about inspiring young people ages 14 to 25 to give back to their communities in community service and physical fitness, and they can go through and achieve an award. And Prince Edward is their youngest son, the Earl of Wessex, who's my boss. He's the acting chairman now that Prince Philip is he's just turned 91 this past June. And it's amazing when we see him on a royal visit going to, for instance, in Baltimore, Maryland, where we created our very first initiative designed specifically for youth at risk. I was walking in behind Prince Edward into one of the schools downtown, the Living Classrooms Foundation, and we had young people from about 17 different organizations that we were working with, including the Boys and Girls Clubs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and one of the young people I'd met before at the Park Heights Boys and Girls Club. And I'm walking in behind Prince Edward, and I thought, it's my first royal visit, he's just going to go through, say hello, and make his speech, and we'll be on to the fundraising luncheon. We were an hour late to the fundraising luncheon because he wanted to meet every single young person. And that kind of sincerity you don't really see in the papers when you talk about, a lot of the tabloids. But truly, they have a heart for philanthropy, and if you take the amount of dollars that they've helped to raise and the hours of community service and free press that they've given, it's really incredible. So that's a long-winded answer of the truth.
No, it's a great answer. Just to follow up in that regard, I just have to ask you, what does the royal family think of Downton Abbey?
Well, I've not actually had a conversation with Prince Edward about it, but his wife, Princess Sophie, who is absolutely incredible. I just got to meet her for the first time in Malta in November, and she actually, for another fundraiser she does at the Children's Hospital in London, had an event, a fundraiser at Highclere Castle, which is Downton Abbey. So I think they're all big fans of it.
You heard it here first. Dr. Vance, you spent your life, 40 years, teaching doctors. We talked last night, and I was really moved by your saying that the thing that you have appreciated the most in your career is teaching those students. You've seen so many changes in the area of healthcare over the last 40 years. Is there any one or two things that you would highlight for us that you think are dramatically different from, say, when you and I left Ole Miss together?
I would say, Charles, that when I started my fellowship in oncology 100 years ago, the overall response rate for cure for cancer was about 35%. So that meant that 65% did do well. And as I retired this last June, what would you guess the response rate would be, taking all comers? Anybody have an idea? 75%, taking all comers now. And so that's one thing that I would say has been a very positive effect in medicine. Those who've heard me talk before probably aren't here today because they heard me talk before. But they know that I always try to work in no smoking, and that has been something over the years here in the state that I've spent a lot of time trying to change that. Now, Mississippi has 68 cities that are smoke-free. The legislation to implement a statewide smoke-free entity failed, I'm sorry to say, this year. The first state university that went smoke-free was Delta State in September of 2010. And Ole Miss went smoke-free last August, and with strict enforcement beginning in January of this year. So I think we're making tremendous gains in non-smoking, because smoking leads to so many cancers, not just lung. Everybody thinks it's just lung. There are a myriad of cancers that are associated with smoking. And so if we can get our legislature to listen up this time in 2014, you'll see a big old smile on my face, because I've been waiting a long time for it.
That's great. You know, your being national chairman of the American Cancer Society was quite a tribute to you, and also I'm sure you learned a lot from that experience. Are there any one or two insights that you gained during that time that you'd want to share with us?
Well, you know, how I got to be the president of the National Society is they had never had a redneck, and they said, well, we know one, and so we'll elect him. You know, that year was one of the busiest ones of my life. I racked up 150,000 miles on Delta Airlines and got to go all over the world in trying to talk about not smoking for the American Cancer Society. The good news is that the board of directors of the National Society are made up of people just like you and me. They put on their shoes just like you and I do, and they care about America and decreasing the incidence of cancer like you and I do. So it was good to know that people were not wearing a different face. They were wearing the same face that I was wearing, and so it was a great time.
Ralph, as you know better than the rest of us, just about everybody in here is affected by cancer, either individually or a family member or somebody's close to them. And I heard you talk last night about how cancer is no longer a death sentence. And even though you alluded to that in your opening remark, flesh that out a little bit about what that means.
Well, you know, like I said, when I started my fellowship back in 1975, it was a death sentence, except for a few entities. But now it's become a chronic disease. And like diabetes and like heart disease and those kinds of things, cancer fits into that category. And that may not sound outstanding to you, but it is to me, because it means that when those of us who have been diagnosed with cancer, it doesn't mean you're going to die from cancer. It means that you have a chance to live a normal life. And so I think that's a huge thing, to have developed the disease. Maybe we can soon say, there's no problem, we're going to cure you with the diagnosis.
That would be great, and what a change in our lifetime.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, Melanie, thinking of death sentences, some of us lived through the stock markets of 08 and 01 and some others. You've spent your career now giving financial advice. What do you know now that is different from what you knew when you were starting out just after Ole Miss about financial advice and the financial markets?
That's a good one. I would have to say the business has changed so dramatically, but I never cease to be amazed at how much I still don't know. So I don't know. When you first start off, as a young person, you come out of school and you're ready to take on the world, and you think you know a whole lot more than you do. And so I think the older I get, the more humble and more aware of my inabilities rather than what I can do.
Well, really, the reason we came is we want to know whether we should buy or sell. You know?
Oh, well, you didn't say that. Absolutely. Of course, I could get in lots of trouble if I tell you exactly what to do, but we are very favorable in the markets right now, and I'm personally very excited about the country. The country is starting to come back, and it's going to be very slow, as it should be, because if it comes back like a rocket, it's going to have another drop like a rocket. So if it can come back and build a good foundation, which it is slowly doing, I think that the rally that we're seeing now, we can see last for a number of years. That's not to say that you won't have down times. Certainly you will. It's never a straight trajectory to the upside. But if you look at the true numbers, the earnings are definitely there. Our corporations in the United States are as lean and mean and strong as we've ever seen them in my career. Unfortunately, they're not able to hire just yet because there's still so many uncertainties as to not only the economy, but politics has played a big role. And now that housing has started to recover, the repercussions of a recovering housing market is excellent for growth. So we think you're going to see a good few years coming, but it'll be slow. And the old saying in my industry is never fight the Fed. And as long as the Fed has got interest rates down and is intending to keep them low, then you go long.
Great, thank you very much. Claire, I would think by this time in our progression of life and equal rights that we'd quit talking about how unusual it is for women to be in any profession. But I would say here in Mississippi in the South, it's still a little unusual in some places for women to be assistant minister of a good church. How are people responding to you as a woman, and how are people responding just in general in this day and age to churches at large and the whole concept of religion and Christianity? Are so many people beyond that now that it's becoming less relevant than you would like for it to be? Just help us understand that.
That's a great question. And before I answer, I just want to take the personal privilege of saying what a gift it is to be a part of the Ole Miss family, to look out and see so many friends. There are many of you here that I know well. It's nice to know another United Methodist clergy. Eddie Rester is here. He serves in Hattiesburg at Parkway Heights. I've been a part of the Ole Miss family a long time. Both my parents were students here, and they both had at least one parent that went to school here. I think I'll confess this as a pastor, that I learned from memory hotty-toddy before the Lord's Prayer. And I'll also say this, you remember the ball game? It was in Jackson. I was holding my father's hand, and I thought for a long, long time I was responsible for the immaculate deflection. So good to be here. About women in ministry or in gender roles, you know, a lot of times I think for me personally, it's been harder to be young than it has been to be a woman. I've served in Columbus first in Mississippi. I was an associate there, and I also have served here in Oxford. And I have to say, being a female, it's you know, it's not been too tough of a road yet. But as soon as I say that, something might happen. But I will say this, there's a preacher, her name is Barbara Brown Taylor. She served as an Episcopal priest for a long, long time, and she had preached, I went to seminary at Duke, and she had preached at Duke Chapel, and she met with some young clergy still in seminary. And a woman asked her, a young girl said, seminarian, you know, I get so frustrated, you know, I'm standing at the door, and the people go out the door, and they always say to me, that was a sweet sermon. You know, and do they say that to me because I'm a woman? And what Barbara Brown Taylor said, she said, you know, don't listen so much to what people actually say, listen to their spirit. And I've tried to do that in my work, and the spirit of the people I've served, for the most part, has been wonderful and beautiful. But there are gender struggles, and we need to pay attention. One thing that I would like to see more and more of, especially in the church, but in the academy, I'd like to see people use inclusive language. It amazes me because words form us and they shape us, and it amazes me that people, even young women, will still say he, or mankind instead of humankind. I think we need to pay attention to the language that we use in our writing, especially in our speech, because it shapes who we are. And females need to know that they're part of the sacred narrative and the narrative of all the world.
And the second part of that question, should believers be concerned about the recent surveys that show there are more unchurched people now than there are churched people?
So you're worried about the church declining? That's a great question. I know a lot of people are worried about it. Recently, we had from South Africa, Dr. Peter Story. He served during apartheid and served in a tumultuous time. He integrated the church during apartheid and had a restaurant for blacks and whites, and it was a risky, scary thing to do. He remembers one worship service where there were people holding his congregation at gunpoint because of their stance. But he believed in the gospel, that all are welcome. And one thing he said to me during his visit was, you know, Claire, don't worry about the numbers. Usually the church is more faithful when it's small. And think about the witness of Jesus Christ and how local and small it was. So I think we need to worry more about how faithful we are. Now, don't tell Warren Black this, my senior minister, because we do need to worry about church numbers, but I think we need to worry more about faithfulness instead of how large we are.
Good. I had a friend of mine tell me along that line, Claire, that churches are spending all their time trying to figure out how to design their worship services for people who don't want to be there in the first place. And so there's a certain amount of truth in that. Cortez, in a real sense, you are doing the Lord's work over there in the Mississippi Delta, teaching young people or Teach for America. Tell us about what you're learning so much so soon right out of college that either surprises you or perhaps we wouldn't understand unless we heard it from you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I'm glad you categorize it as the Lord's work. There was an interview that I started yesterday with the Methodist Hour in Jackson. And I want to say that teaching is definitely a calling, and the work is so difficult that one has to be really rooted and grounded in the Word of God, in beliefs, to continue to do that work daily. And to expound on what I'm learning as a teacher at such a young age, in college, I thought the education crisis was just isolated to that of the achievement gap, and that kids from, black kids from the Mississippi Delta just aren't performing. And I always tried to figure out why the issue was so complex. But what I'm learning is you can't take socioeconomic status out of the equation when you talk about educating a child. And what is more, you can't take family structure out. And as a teacher, we can't dwell on the socioeconomic status, family structure, and where our kids come from. But we have to figure out how to break that and say, well, you're in my classroom for these 50 minutes or the 90 minutes. We're going to do everything possible to educate you, to make an impact on your life and to make a difference. But in doing that, as a teacher, you have to move outside of your classroom and go into the community. One of the things that I like to do is I like to make 5 positive phone calls every week to parents, to my students' parents, and say, this is what your child did this week. And in doing that, you begin to solve a widespread of problems. And you begin to motivate an entire family. I think an African proverb said it best, that it takes a village to educate a child. And as a teacher, you are a village worker. And you definitely have to be called into this work to survive and to really be that village leader. And oftentimes in being that leader, you're going to have to take the back seat and say, what is best for this child? What does this child want? Rather than creating a path that child may not be interested in. Far too often I go into my classroom saying, I want every student in my classroom to attend the greatest university on this side of heaven, which I believe is the University of Mississippi. Oh. And while I believe that, and that is my personal conviction, that may not be best for that child. That child may want to be a mechanic, and I need to figure out how to best put them in a program that they can become the best mechanic, and then they can transform and revitalize their community through their own interests. So I think I've learned that best, that there's no particular cookie cutter design for educating America's youth.
Now, Cortez, you teach English, honors English. What's the hardest aspect of honors English you have to teach? and then we're going to figure out whether we could learn it.
I think the most difficult part of teaching honors English is we have this expectation for what an honors class should look like. And I have problems with that, but when I teach in a community where my students come from text-poor homes, they've been deprived of reading, writing, and critical thinking, I have to adjust my curriculum as an honors teacher. And we begin by talking about what it is or what it looks like to be a reader, a writer, and one who thinks critically. And so I find it difficult early on to teach critical thinking. I find it difficult to teach the reading of a text that may not be very interesting to you because you've never engaged with a text outside of small books at home as a child. And so I think what kids in Tupelo get in an honors English class is different from what my students in Greenwood would be. But that does not change the expectation. We move them from one place, and at the end of the year we say, are we at a better place? Can we read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or can we read Invisible Man at the end of the year? And so starting out at a place of this is where my students are, but I'm going to move them to a place of comfort with text that they may have not engaged in or may not be as familiar with or have the cultural relevancy to really engage with the text.
And to answer your own question, can they read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn when you're done teaching?
They will be able to. I'm convinced that by the time they leave my 9th grade honors English class, that they will be able to engage. And to gauge that, one of my students put together a reading fair project, and his reading fair project was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So I believe that by the end of the year, my students will be able to do that.
Well, we thank you for what you're doing. This is great work. I'll ask the panelists a general question, and then I'm going to move quickly to the audience, the all-stars out here. We read and hear so much about technology and how it's changed every single profession, and it certainly has, some for better, some for worse. In my profession of newspapers, we might say for the worse, although they just hadn't caught on to it yet. So would any of you care to characterize not the past, but the future in your general area of expertise of what we could expect technology to change the way you do things? Would it, Claire, would it change anything as basic and timeless as the message?
Talking about
Technology?
I think it's changing it every day, and it's hard to keep up. You have some people that are paying their offerings now with a swipe card in the back of the pews. Also, it's
Well,
becoming...
the Methodists don't miss a trick, do they?
We're not doing that yet. But it's increasingly important that you're on Facebook and you know use multimedia for sermons and preaching and staying on the cutting edge to reach your people, because the church is about handing down the story, the gospel story, and you need every available technology to do that and to do it well.
You're going to have 150 new friends on Facebook after that. Who else would talk about how technology is changing and will change what you're doing?
I would say it's definitely changed because we're such a global organization, 144 countries, staying in touch with one another. And a great thing, I still have a BlackBerry. I'm not an iPhone fan. But anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country where you're traveling, you can automatically be in touch with people. This is not a new phenomenon, but the ways in which you can use that technology through email, through Skyping, holding teleconferences literally across the world, wherever you are, in a hotel room, it's incredible. And I think it not only within our sector, but the way we engage with other people and the way humans can interact, it's remarkable. I got my first cell phone in the 8th grade because my mother didn't know when we were going to pick up from varsity soccer practice, so she wanted me to be able to call her. And it was one of those old Nokia phones, and now you've got the pinch to zoom screens, and it's just the technology even in my young life has changed so much. So I can't wait to see what it does in the future.
I guess I'll talk about it as a teacher. I think there are positive and negative effects with technology. We were actually just having a conversation about this at school. A lot of schools have moved to textbooks on iPads or MacBook computers. And as an English teacher, I'm not a fan of, is Richard Howarth here? He would appreciate what I'm about to say. I'm not a fan of books on Kindle and iPad. I like to really engage with the text. So technology, to a certain extent, is really pulling down the level of engagement with a text, and students being able to actually write on a text and be able to comprehend and break down that text. As well as there's we have an academic language, and we also have social language. And kids right now can't really balance that. I get LOLs and essays. And I'm not laughing out loud because you put that LOL there. And ha ha ha. No, I understand that that's funny to you, but that's not appropriate for this form of writing. So technology is really changing diction and word choice for our students. And while it's great, it does present some challenges. And I think any English teacher would agree with me is that we'd love to keep our paper so our students can engage with the text and really write in the margins and have fun with the text.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go to the audience now. Andrew's going to take care of the microphones from people on the left, and we have Anna's going to take care of on the right. Raise your hand and wait for the microphone. In panels that I've moderated around the world, people pretend to ask questions, but they really want to make a comment. And I would spend half my time trying to get them to get to the question. We have the freedom here. If you just want to make a comment, it's fine. We're not on 60 Minutes here. So that's just fine. Right here. And say who you are and where you're from. Not everybody will know you.
Hi, I'm Doug Odom from, is it on?
It's on.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm from Jackson. You asked if there, I mean, you didn't ask, but I'm asking a question. You presented father, son, brothers, mother, daughter. Well, there's a mother, son in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well,
so
good.
I didn't know what, that was my question. Did you know that? So it wasn't a comment.
Wait a minute. You introduced the mother, son.
The son is, he was in charge of the big event, so he's worn out, and he was on the verge of catching something, so he's in the bed asleep. But this is his mother, Douglas Odom.
Oh yeah, Doug Odom.
Yeah, and this is his mother, Walter Reed.
Great accomplishment, Walter Reed.
Here we go.
I believe there's also a mother-grandson group here, too. Ugandine Sturdivant, her grandson.
All right.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. We're becoming more like the British family all along.
That's right.
Okay, do we have any cousins or?
I know there's brother and sister and husband and wife.
Where are they?
Rosenblatts and Gordon. Ah, we got her. We caught her. Gordon married one of his peers in the Hall of Fame for the year you graduated, and she is also the sister of that handsome dude next to him.
Well,
that's Bill Rosenblatt.
Well, great, and congratulations. Generally, if you get in a Hall of Fame, then you've pretty much done it. Ed Williams, who was the editor of the Daily Mississippian here a couple years before me, last year was inducted into the North Carolina Journalism Hall of Fame, and he's here with us today. Ed, we're glad you're here, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say that in any gathering of Ole Miss people, you will have more kinship relationships than Faulkner could have handled. So if we get into this, we'll be here all day. I'm curious about, there are two of you women who are in lines of work where traditionally there has been kind of a glass ceiling, in your case a stained glass ceiling, I guess. As you've progressed through your career, have you seen that changing in the financial world? And as you enter your career, I suppose, are you seeing changes in the ecclesiastical world in that regard?
Well, Ed, I'm glad you asked the question. It has changed quite a bit, but when I first started in 1980, it was one of those things where you knew that you had shocked someone when you walked in the room to talk to them about their finances. But And I did on occasion have somebody say, well, I'm not going to deal with a woman. If that bothers you, whether you're a woman, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're short, whether you're tall, then you need to put that to the side, because you have to say that's fine. If that's the way you feel about it, I'm not going to change your mind next. It has changed quite a bit, but one of the things that you asked a minute ago about technology, it has changed because technology has helped women like me who wanted to. One of the reasons I was interested in the business is because the stock market opened at 9 and closed at 3, and if I was going to have children, that was just right. So it was just perfect for me. So now that we're able to, this morning before we got going, I was talking to clients on my computer and doing some things. I could do that when my children were little, and in all fairness, I work with my husband, so if I wasn't at the office, he was. But if somebody woke up sick, I would have the ability to continue working while I knocked him out with some Advil or something. But it is not. I don't see it, in my opinion, I just don't look for it, so I don't see it. I'm sure it's out there, but I just don't see it. And I don't remember seeing a lot of it coming up through the ranks. I do know that, I did not know when I was here that only 10% of the business school were women. It's just not something that I'll look for. But yes, it exists. I think it probably exists more.
Subtle.
It's much more subtle. As I say, only once have I ever had somebody say, I'm not going to deal with a woman.
Claire, what would you add to that?
I loved what you said, Melanie, about how, you're not looking for it. If you want to be effective in your work, you can't be paying attention to or worrying about what's standing in your way. You just got to move forward. And so I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on whether I'm being received as a woman or not. I just want to be received as just if they'll listen to anything I have to say. But, when I went to seminary in North Carolina at Duke Divinity School, 40% of my graduating class were female. And that was in 2001. So, like I said, maybe I've just been in areas. I do think I remember reading an article 2 or 3 years ago, and it talked about there's still not as many in the United Methodist Church women serving in large senior pastor roles. So I think that's an area where we could grow. We had our bishop now, Bishop Swanson, first African American to serve as a bishop in Mississippi in the United Methodist Church. But before him, we had Bishop Hope Morgan Ward. She served here 8 years, and she was the first female United Methodist bishop. She was very intentional to make sure women were serving in larger churches. And so to answer the question, I think we're improving, maybe not as fast, especially in the South, as I would like, but I do think we are improving in including women in roles of leadership in the church.
Just to add, I've been more discriminated against as a Southerner in my industry than I have as a woman. And I'll guarantee you I have used it to my advantage.
Okay, who else? Don't be shy. You come all the way back here on the back row. Mike Robbins, great athlete.
Well, I didn't take honors English, so I'm afraid to ask where you're from. But no, I'm real intrigued by our two young guys. I would like to know your background as to where you went to high school, both of you.
Were you talking to me?
Cortez. Sir, who you people and where you from?
I'll yield to you. Well, have any of you ever heard of Amory, Mississippi? It's a very small, quaint town.
Yes.
So living in Washington, I always have to say, well, it's about 30 minutes outside of Tupelo. But you have two Amory, Mississippians on the panel today.
Yay!
So
I'm with Sam Haskell.
from Amory, Mississippi, went to Amory High School, graduated in 2006. Would have been the third generation from my family to attend the Mississippi State University. Much to my grandparents both went to State. Both my parents went to State. My aunt and uncle and their spouses went to State.
and every other grandchild after me has since gone to state. But Ole Miss gave me a full ride. I mean, I had a few scholarships, including the Ole Miss First Scholarship, which is an incredible program. And if you're thinking about giving, you should look at that. I'm serious. It's a great organization. It helped me not have to pay for anything, so I could focus on school, focus on education. I was heavily involved in student government here. I was lucky to be elected ASB treasurer. I was unfortunate to not win the presidency, but had I not, I wouldn't have met two incredible young men, two men. But I told the story earlier. In this room in 2008 during the debate, Charles Overby was giving a panel discussion, and Lanny Griffith, who is an Ole Miss alum with a partner at Barbara Griffith and Rogers in D.C., was here. And I'd wanted to meet him because I was writing my senior thesis at the Honors College on lobbying. And so, long story short, I met him. The next summer, I worked for another Ole Miss alum named Sam Haskell. And both of these gentlemen serve on the board for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And so when I was working for Sam, he said, I just think you should take a look at this. You should interview for this, and it'd be a great experience for you. And I looked at the board roster, and of course, I see Lanny Griffith's name. So Sam calls Lanny. Long story short, that's how I got engaged. But for the Lott Leadership Institute for High School Seniors, which I did as a rising senior, I would not have even considered putting down a cowbell to come to Ole Miss. And I'm serious. I was born and bred. My name was on the drill field out at state before I was even born. And but there, it was a great experience to get academic credit here, spend a week in Washington, D.C., and many of those people, in fact, 3 of my group were in the Hall of Fame class with me in 2010. But Ole Miss, unlike any other place, especially in Washington, D.C., we have a very strong delegation. And I was mentioning this to a few of you earlier, the affinity that Ole Miss alums have for the school, whether you're 3 years out or many years out, it doesn't matter because you have a great time here. And little did I know that Ole Miss would lead me to work for the Royals, but it did. But it's been a great experience. So that's my background.
By the way, I was born in Amory. I'm
Yes.
originally, I didn't grow up, but I lived in New Albany after that.
Well, we'll take anybody we can get. We need to up our numbers. So.
How about you, Cortez?
Well, I do not work for the Royals. I am not from Amory, but I am from Calhoun City, Mississippi. Calhoun County, Vardaman, sweet potato capital of the world. So if anyone wants any sweet potatoes, have some in the truck. We're always selling them. But
He's great.
we have something in common, Josh. I decided to come to Ole Miss at the last minute. Does anyone know Steve Guyton?
Yes.
By any chance?
Yes.
Right. So Steve convinced me to come to Ole Miss at the last minute. I was going to Mississippi State. Small story, I shared this with my students the other day, and I'm going to be extremely vulnerable at this point and share some information with you. My family was not too happy. I think I shared this in a column in the DM as well. My family was not too excited about me attending Ole Miss, given that we are from Calhoun City, 45 minutes up the road. My grandparents, they still had what happened to James Meredith in the back of their minds whenever I was thinking about going to college. So I was going to Mississippi State. So I went out on a limb and I said, you know what, I'm going to kind of subvert what my grandparents want me to do, and I'm going to attend Ole Miss. It's been great. I enjoyed my time at Ole Miss. Like Josh, I ran for student body president. We were both not successful. I'm a teacher now, but he works for the Royals.
We still have lots in common.
But I was gospel choir president here. I was director of the big event last year. Doug, we had a chance to work together with the big event. But I had a great time at Ole Miss. And like Josh said, Ole Miss is such a fine institution. At school all the times, oftentimes the students will come up and say, Mr. Rebel, or they will actually drive my truck, Ole Miss tag on the front. So I really love this place. It's been great. I do not regret my decision to come to Ole Miss at all. Thankful for Mr. Billy Gotcho and the Lott Institute. I got a chance to study in 2 countries, South Africa and Ecuador, and it's been great. Neither one of my parents went to college, and so they feel like they went to Ole Miss now, and so we're loving it. My niece she's going to Ole Miss. That's not an option. My children have an option between Harvard and Ole Miss, North or South. Dr. Gates, who's sitting in the back, I call her Dr. Gates. She went to Harvard in the North. And so my children have an option between Ole Miss South or Harvard North.
Great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Charles Cassio. I'm a 2008 member of the Hall of Fame, here with one of the mother-daughter combos. Just kind of a theme I've picked up on, looking at the panel, looking at the people represented here, is diversity. And, I was having a conversation with a friend who was a member of the Hall of Fame a few years ago. And I said, "Are you coming to the reunion?" And he said, "I'm not coming. I'm not accepted there." And I was just blown away and said, "This is Ole Miss. Like, you're in the Hall of Fame. You have to come back. Like, if you're not going to come and represent people, who is?" And so it would just really blew me away that someone could feel that in the place that's so loving and caring. So my question to the panel is, in your separate industries, how has diversity influenced, changed, improved your field?
I'll take that one. When I started medical school 100 years ago, as I said, there were at the University Medical Center colored lockers and colored fountains and colored bathrooms. And I left that first year and said, something's got to change. And thank goodness it did change. So I've seen diversity change in our system here of Ole Miss drastically. We now have officers of the medical school classes that are female and African American and Asian, and people vote for the person and not for anything else. And so I'm proud very much of University of Mississippi, both here on this campus and in the Jackson campuses, for taking the bull by the horns, as it were, and making it right.
The thing that has happened in my lifetime that has made more difference in the lives of more people and in the state of Mississippi has been the abolition of Jim Crow. I told Mrs. Merle Evers one time, Elise and I had a luncheon for Mrs. Evers when we lived in the mansion. And I told her that we white folks owed her and her martyred husband as much as black folks do, because he helped free us too. We were all prisoners of a system. We were not free to speak as we would like to speak. We were inhibited and ostracized if we did speak, frankly, on the issue of race. And so Mississippi was we still mentally were part of the Confederacy as late as the 1950s. And so when finally, with the aid of the federal courts and the United States Congress, we threw off the shackles of legal segregation, we began to move. And I think we can measure the beginning of the progress of this state with the abolition of segregation and with one other factor. About that same time, we made it a priority of public policy that we would improve our system of education at all levels. And those two accomplishments, I think, have set us on a course that will enable us to be competitive, really competitive for the first time. And as we further diminish those limits in terms of diversity, in terms of gender, along with race, we will, I think, be able to keep, we've talked about the brain drain. Much of the brain drain from Mississippi has come about because of the social inhibitions that are imposed on so many people. And as we begin to break down those old taboos, Mississippi, I think, will be much more competitive in every way, as long as we keep our sights on improving education as the #1 political priority in our state. I mentioned a while ago Marilyn Howell, first woman president of the student body at Ole Miss in 1943, 44. When I graduated from law school, there was one woman in my class. Last year, I think almost, if not entirely, 50% were women. And of course, when I finished Ole Miss in 1949, it was unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable, that an African American would ever graduate from the University of Mississippi. We have come such a long way, but I must tell you, we still have a lot to do.
Mr. Overby. I'm Marshall Bennett, and from Jackson, by way of Chula, Mississippi. For the last 10 years, I've lived in New York City, and I tend to be an optimist, but I've seen, after 50 years in Mississippi and 10 years in New York, a general dumbing down of America, where people are getting their news not from the newspaper or NBC or CBS or ABC, but on the internet, AOL sites or TMZ, and they watch the Kardashians, they look at Honey Boo Boo. I mean, it just seems that there is so much mediocrity, and looking at millions of people over the course of time, they seem to be stuck in mediocrity. And I'm just wondering what people of well-meaning and knowledge and educated people can do to help the average American and the average Mississippian seek those things in life that are more meaningful, and help me restore my faith in what's etched on the Williams Library, that humanity will not only endure but prevail. What can we do at the university as community leaders to sort of change that downward trend that it seems to be prevalent in this day and age?
What a strong question. Any of our panelists want to take a crack?
I'll venture on that one, Marshall. I don't know that this would be the all-encompassing answer to your question, but I do see, because I've had the privilege to work with a business school throughout the years, and also we interview young people from time to time. And to me, people are not made to be responsible soon enough. These kids, I just can't get over the fact that so many don't work in high school, don't have jobs in high school. Then they go to college, and they go to college year-round, and you look at their resumes, and you want to say, well, honey, what the heck can you do? And so I think parents, I was taken aback when my kids were in high school that how many parents tried to make things so easy so the children would go to school 12 months out of the year so that in the fall they could really have a lot of fun during football season or be a cheerleader or whatever it was. And those kids didn't work in the summer times. And they weren't made to be responsible for anything. They weren't responsible for their gasoline. They weren't responsible for just a lot of things. And I think the younger we start making children, eventually, someone told me when I had little bitty boys, said, you're not raising boys, Melanie, you're raising men. And you need to start raising them to be men from right now. And I think that's true across boys and girls. I think that we as a society have basically said, well, you can't work till you're 16. I think that's wrong. I think you put a kid, and this is going to be sexist, but I think you put a boy on a landscaping crew and let him understand how nice it is to be in school during the fall. But that to me is what I see, Marshall, when we're talking to young people, that and manners, the LOL thing. If I'm going to interview you, I don't want to get a text thanking me for the interview. I think a written note. Now, the problem with that, you tell these kids this when you're speaking to them, they look at you like, a written note? You mean like on paper? And what I try and explain to them is, when they're at Ole Miss, everybody is the same. Everybody's doing everything the same. Everybody's society is the same. Their culture is the same. But when you get out of Ole Miss, suddenly you're looking at me going, oh, lady, would you just hush and give me a job? Because it's me. And I deserve a job because now I have a college degree. I'm looking at you. That's what they don't understand is what we're looking at as they come in, that I'm looking at you saying, okay, I don't see any jobs here. I don't see any real responsibility here. And I just wonder how in the heck you're going to get me. What is it that you're going to do to get me in trouble or get my firm in trouble? So that would be my answer. I find that this mediocrity is because people are bored and they're watching things like Honey Boo Boo because they don't have anything that they got to go do.
Melanie, just forget that text I sent to you. Thank you.
I won't. I'll never let you forget that.
I'd like to respond to that question as well. In addition to what she said about responsibility, I think if our schools would begin to focus on character education, we teach responsibility and character education. And I'm going to be a little pushy here and add one additional thing that can happen within the next few weeks in the state of Mississippi, is that we have a statewide pre-kindergarten program. And we begin to teach kids early on what it is to be a responsible adult. We teach them character education, and we let them shape their own morals and values based on what a good person would do. I think is key. When I was growing up, while my parents didn't have the best academic education, I think one of the things that they did instill in me is respect. And you must respect who you are as an individual first, before you can go into society. And when you build that respect for yourself, you're not going to allow yourself to waste so much time with the small things, but you're going to be so hungry to do things that are better, to acquire more information, to just be a better person. So if we can start teaching our children at the age of 4, because some of them are not going to get it at home, so we have to teach it to them at school. And so we started pre-K, and we begin to teach responsibility, and we begin to teach character education. Oh, the difference we can make in our state.
With character, I believe everything you just said. With character, one of my favorite Americans is Booker T. Washington, who said, poetically, character is power. And one of the things, I think Booker T. Washington would love what the Duke of Edinburgh's award stands for, because essentially what we do, I mean, you think that I work for the Royals and it's, I go to high tea every day, but we actually do a lot of work with at-risk youth. I mean, our mandate is running youth development programs for ages 14 to 25. That's it. Doesn't matter if your socioeconomic background, your religion, your race, your color, nothing. Anyone who wants to take part. And one of the things that we found on an international basis is that because young people, our program encourages them to spend at least 1 hour a week in 3 areas: community service, physical fitness, and special skills. And it's based on experiential learning. And by meeting minimum time periods at the bronze, silver, and gold level, you can receive an award from the Duke of Edinburgh, a bronze, silver, gold Duke of Edinburgh award. And what we found is that once a young person goes through the program, 87% continue doing the activities while they were working on their award, even after they've matriculated to earn it, because they've developed good habits. And I believe very fervently that people want to do good. If they have the facility, if they have the structure, if they have the framework, if they have the inkling. And what we're doing with the award program, what Cortez is doing with Teach for America, is giving young people an opportunity, a vision, something that they can tap into and increase their confidence and show that they have worth. You know, a lot of crime comes, as you'll read in studies, from the lack of financial opportunities, lack of economic opportunities for young people, especially in impoverished areas, to pick themselves up and to find a job. It's harder for them to do that. But if they've got increased confidence and they've got the skills, that builds character. And I think it's so important. You've got the book side of the classroom, but you've also got to teach them about life. And when they can grasp that, it's transformative. And we've seen that with the award program. And there are a lot of great organizations that do that. But I would say that's a very special opportunity.
Thank you for those answers and a good question, Marshall. I'm going to take a couple of more questions. Paul Parrish, Rhodes Scholar, 1968.
Our class had dinner together last night, and we had the best time. I was so overstimulated I couldn't actually sleep, so I'm a little shaky right now. And it's partly because I want to ask a question that's a difficult one. I live in Berkeley, California. I write about dancing. I have a million little jobs that supports a kind of bohemian artist's existence. But one reason I live in Berkeley is because we have a really good ballet company in San Francisco, and there's not one in Mississippi for me to be interested in and follow. And despite the greatness of the IBC, the ballet competition, that's once every couple of years, and it's only once. And I need something I can do and be following. But it's also the case that I'm gay, and I moved to Berkeley in order to live inside the law. And one of the reasons I've wanted to bring this up is that I think there's been a gay brain drain from Mississippi. Tennessee Williams, you all know, is a famous Mississippian. He didn't live here. David Bryant was a classmate just above me. Many people who knew David don't know he's gay, but his mother told me. A lot of people who would like to be able to contribute to Mississippi don't feel like, I thank you, Charles, for bringing up the issue of somebody who felt that he wouldn't be welcome back. I know I'm welcome back. Amanda made me come. We'll pick you up in Memphis. You can stay at my house. You've got to come. And I had a wonderful education at Ole Miss. I loved it here. I was an English major. And I had Gerald Walton. I had Dr. Noyes, who wrote all of Chancellor Williams' speeches. And he was working a tightrope, and he was a master of 18th century prose, and he knew exactly how to write those speeches so that he could make it right between Scylla and Charybdis and keep the university from hitting any of those rocks. I would come back to visit Dr. Noyes. What I want to say is that I think it's real important for y'all to think about if you know anybody gay, and if those people want to get married, who do they want to marry? And you know what, if you have, a friend of mine once said, I have nothing against homosexuals, but I don't want my daughter marrying one. And believe me, you don't. You don't. That's a recipe for disaster. Sometimes it'll work because people care about each other that much. But the other problem, actually, the more important problem, is the problem of the child growing up in a gay child growing up in a family. Because straight people have gay kids. Black people have black kids. All I'm trying to say is that the environment at home may be really hostile. It may be the most hostile environment that the kid ever goes through is at home. And that's something I just wanted to, it's just a seed I want to plant because you might not have ever considered that. It might have crossed your mind. And if you're a good Christian, or if you actually, it will probably have crossed your mind. If compassion is the side of Christianity that means something to you. And I guess I would like to ask anybody on the panel that would like to comment on this, what you think could be done to let gay children think they might have a future and not kill themselves.
Well, thank you for sharing that and for the question. It's a pretty strong question. Anybody want to take a crack at that? Well,
I could take that. Paul, I think people like you getting up and saying what's coming from your heart is very helpful for those of us who may not be thinking those thoughts. Not because I don't think we can think them, we just don't wake up every day and think them. But having you in my home last night made me start thinking about some of the things you said today. It was an eye-opening experience of love that you had made the effort to come back to Mississippi for this. And Amanda did pressure you, of course, but that's the way she operates. I would say, though, coming back and opening up your heart is very helpful. Keep doing that.
We don't, in my opinion, have enough frank conversation about the role of gay people in our society. And it's a learning experience. We are all suffering from so many long years of bias and prejudice against gays, old wives' tales of every kind. And it is up to us, it seems to me, to check our own minds and our own feelings and try to expand our understanding of the universality of human beings and the values that go along with being a human being. Some of the finest people I know, some of the most respected Christian people that I know come out of the gay community. And I have resolved that I'm not going to ever put them down. They're entitled to be respected as all of us in this room are to be expected. And it's up to all of us to develop, I think, a more intelligent attitude and relationship with gay people.
thank you, Governor.
Since I represent, I'm kind of the church in the room, I guess, and I feel responsible to talk about this. Paul, thank you for your witness. In the United Methodist Church, this is certainly a struggle. People in a local church disagree. Clergy in a conference disagree. Our bishops disagree. One of the shadow sides of the mainline church is the homogeneity. So we struggle with diversity just in general. And, you know, one of the things that I'm sorry for, whatever side you fall on, we need to remember Scripture is used a lot of times as a weapon to exclude. And when you look at all of Scripture, there are about 8 verses that could literally be interpreted to be exclusive or condemning, depending on how you interpret it. But there are over 300 passages that you could read condone slavery in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. There are passages in Scripture because women were considered inferior at the time that much of the Bible was written, that women are seen in an inferior light. So, you know, I'm not going to come down on a side here, but I hope that my denomination, the United Methodist Church, my prayer is that we'll continue to struggle, we'll continue to listen. You know, listening looks so much like love that most people cannot tell the difference. My challenge for members of the mainline church, or just any church, or communities of faith, would be to get to know one gay or lesbian, transgender person. I mean, really get to know them and learn their story. Don't try to change them or convert them. Just really get to know them and understand who they are. And then also my other challenge would be pay attention to what Jesus says about embracing everyone. I want to end by saying Jesus never says one thing about the issue of homosexuality.
Can I just say, since we're starting strong and finishing strong, no, I didn't mean it that way, but we grew up in a very different Mississippi than you all did. But we love the state just as much. You know, I'm part of the brain drain. I went to D.C. because that's where I was able to be employed. I'm counting the days until I can come back and help, the state regain. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I believe in it. And but, what's interesting to me is that whether I'm in London or whether I'm in Michigan, wherever, sometimes I'm the first Mississippian someone has ever met, and I love it. Because I can be an ambassador for the state, for Ole Miss, and it completely, sometimes absolutely warps whatever distorted image they had about us. And, when I ran for ASB president, I ran against one of my very great friends, R.T.A. Rogers, who I met beforehand, before we even came to Ole Miss, but we were in the lot leadership for high school students together, and he and I have still a great friendship today. And he's black, and I'm white, and he beat me at Ole Miss, fair and square, because he was a better candidate. And, where else can you say something like that? I mean, whether it's your race or your religion, we are the award program, we deal with Muslim communities, and we deal with, all sorts of different religions and things. But I think instead of being so slighted to one thing, it's not even about being inclusive, it's understanding sometimes. And understanding when you're sitting down next to someone that we're all in this together. I think sometimes we lose the fabric of life, that life is short. I'm young, but life is short. And I'm appreciative of that. But at some level, I think that if we can just be understanding and open and welcoming, that others will eventually fall in line.
Great. Thank you very much. We're going to have time for one more question, and I saw right here. Thanks.
My name is Ryan Upshaw, and I'm in the class of 2006 Hall of Fame here at the university. One of the things that I wanted to ask the panel, luckily I'm still here. I work here for the university, and so I get to sort of relive the memories of my undergraduate years almost every day, and I get to live vicariously through people like Josh and Cortez, who I knew during their undergraduate years here. But I was just going to ask the panel, what are maybe one or two of your favorite memories during your time here at the University of Mississippi? I figure most people that are in this room have great memories from being in the Hall of Fame and things like that. So what were your memories from your time here?
I'll go first. I would have to say the friendships, certainly. But what I was always, and my friends would give me a hard time because I loved it so much here that I could literally just go and look at the grove. That was something that was calming to me. And that was back in the day, it wasn't the center of everything at the time, but it was beautiful, and so much about the campus was beautiful that there was, I would just say, I just love Ole Miss, and they would give me the hardest time. But the feel, like I'm looking at Rose, and I can remember passing, "Hey Rose, how you doing, Rose?" And I think maybe a little that has been lost because the campus has gotten so big. I've noticed several times when I walk across campus, I always, "It's you?" Well, at least you're man enough. But everybody knew everybody spoke. So that was part of what to me was so special about Ole Miss. And then just the beauty of it. I just thought it was a beautiful place, and I just love it. I just love Ole Miss.
My favorite memory is having given my girlfriend my fraternity pin under that old catalpa tree right out there. She's sitting right back there after over 60 years of being married to her with our daughter Lily.
Not a better memory than that, is it? Ralph?
There are many things that I remember in my heart about Ole Miss. The beautiful women is certainly right at there at the top. But it's not just the beautiful women, it's the beautiful, intelligent people that I met during my tenure here of 4 years. And, the people that last evening we picked up and hadn't seen each other in about 10 years, and the conversation never stopped. It just went on, and it was a very meaningful experience for me. And that's what Ole Miss is. It's friends who can pick up right where they left off. You don't have to see them or talk to them every day, but it's the same experience. And so I think any place that can do that has got to be a good place. And I love Ole Miss too.
Anybody else?
I was just going to say, my favorite memories revolve around the pride of the South. I was a part of the band on the dance team here, and give David Wilson so much credit for the great leadership he's provided for many, many years here. And I think it was 1997, I'm not the best at sports statistics, but we were at Tiger Stadium, and we marched in and they kept saying, high school band, high school band. But when we got there, we won the game. We were the ones, I think we did play Dixie then, but we were very excited to be had won that game, and it was an exciting moment.
I would have to say that definitely my proudest memory, it was sort of the combination of all those memories. It was, honest to goodness, being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Because when I got onto campus, you see the Mississippi and Daily Mississippi and all the people that have gotten it, and you hear about me. This is the top honor that you can achieve. And every day, I worked and tried to figure out, what I can do to hopefully one day get in the Hall of Fame. And I thought after I lost the presidency that I was like, oh, my chances are gone. I'm never going to be in the Hall of Fame. But I think it's just the culmination of all of that it means so much. And I love Ole Miss. I absolutely do. There is no better place in the world. There's no better university. It's, we love it. We're all in the Hall of Fame, right? But it's something deep within that you just can't explain sometimes. It's a great place.
I think my proudest memory, if you've ever been part of ASB at Ole Miss, it kind of consumed my life while I was here. But I was talking to one of my friends the other day that I was in college with, and I was like, probably my proudest memory would be how we would just sit and argue about stuff that does not matter now. We would debate over resolutions and Senate bills, and when you leave, you're just like, so I wasted how many hours working? And I can share this with Troy and Caleb, but I was chair of a Constitution committee to rewrite the ASB code and Constitution, and it's still on my computer. And so I think it's just like wasting so much time arguing. No, this can't happen this way, and the document is still on my computer, and it's not a living and breathing document for ASB right now. So just the time I wasted on pointless things.
Amanda, Marilyn, go ahead. We'll give you the last word, Marilyn.
One little point that's so different. I've come to the campus now, and when I was here many years ago, nobody speaks. We are not as friendly as we used to be.
That is true.
That same camaraderie is just not there anymore. So what can we do to bring it back and let these young people know what they're missing by not being closer to each other?
You have an answer for that, Betty?
Yes, I do. What I think we need to do is to teach people how to be good citizens. We live in Houston, Texas, and I'm surprised that we're going to have to teach Mississippians how to speak to each other, look us in the eye, and say, hello, where are you from? All right, but when I was a child, I remember a blue book, and this blue book said how to be a good citizen. How many of you remember this book? And it absolutely taught you how to be respectful, how to have manners, how to appreciate people, how to pick up your clothes, etc., etc., etc. But again, we live in Houston, Texas, and there is such diversity of people coming into our country, and we are not teaching them to be Americans. And to me, this is the perfect way to teach children through a handbook of how to have a good character and how to be honest people and to have integrity.
Betty, thank you very much. Now, with good manners and respectfully, I'm going to close this conversation. It's been a terrific conversation. Let's thank our panelists.